All right, so in part one, I had talked about the idea of people being able to vote on whether an occupation continues. But in this one, I wanted to talk about the standing army that we created. You see, over the course of the last 20 years, we assembled a fighting force of 300,000 troops that would be able to defend the country, and barely even fired a single shot when the Taliban came back. So that worked out well. It turns out that there were actually reports, independent reports, obviously, not necessarily from the State Department, that this was indeed a paper tiger. Essentially, this is a facade. Those 300,000 troops really won't do much. But actually, this kind of makes sense if you think about it. I mean, imagine if you were growing up in a country, and the only real identity you ever knew your country as having was under the occupation of another country that kept saying that they wanted you to be an independent country. You probably wouldn't have formed much of a national identity at that point. But you would have also been talking to people who remember the before times, the long, long ago, the way, way back. And they would probably tell you about what it was like before the United States went into the country in the first place. And chances are they're talking to older men. And chances are a lot of those older men didn't really see a huge difference after the occupation, depending on who you talk to. So you might start asking yourself questions like, what exactly are we fighting for? I don't really even know what we're trying to preserve here. And since you failed to create some kind of a national identity, they really don't know what they're rallying behind. So then the Taliban comes in, and they do have a pretty clear mission statement and an ideology all of their own, so they all know what they're fighting for. But the 300,000 troops that you've raised really don't. And as far as they're concerned, they're probably not going to win this, so what are they laying down their lives for? You haven't really answered that question for them, have you? And that leads me to another potential solution we might want to consider in the future. Something that I saw posted on Twitter when I was reading through a bunch of comments, which is usually a hellscape, but sometimes someone says something interesting, and this was one of those times. Why not arm the women? Yeah, think about that for a second. Instead of raising an army of 300,000 men in the country, why not 300,000 Afghani women? And I'm not saying that because I'm some kind of woke progressive or anything. No, I'm saying that from sheer logic. While young men might not see any benefit or gain from either having an American-style democracy or rule by the Taliban, women definitely would, and chances are they had been talking to older women that might remember or have experienced what happened under the Taliban, and are not really buying the whole line that they have changed. And while it might not necessarily be an entirely equal rights situation, the fact that there is a democracy and the fact that they might have more agency in that society is something that they would want to fight for, is something that they would want to push back against the oppression of. Moreover, if the women are out there and they're fighting the war, any men that might have joined aren't going to run away then, right? That's going to look terrible for them. The women are going to stay and fight. We're going to run away. Yeah, I feel manly now. No, so they're going to stick with it too. I can't just abandon the women on the battlefield. That seems wrong. Now, we might not have done it in this situation, but again, I'm thinking about all the nations we try to build in the future. Maybe this is something you might want to consider. Recruitment of females into your army. Because they'll fight. They have more to lose. Your prophecy for the day. A refugee is just an American you haven't met yet.